The 20th century does not heal its wounds. It learns to hide them behind numbers. Welcome to another scene from the book, The History of Economics in 25 Scenes. Today I'll tell you about Friedman, Minsky, and Rothbard, and the struggle for the soul of the 20th century. After war and depression, nations rebuild. Money flows again. Living standards rise. Television promises comfort on credit, and growth becomes the new measure of success. Yet beneath this apparent stability, a deeper anxiety lingers. Is this prosperity solid, or just another illusion waiting to break? Economics now replaces theology, not with gods or salvation, but with models, forecasts, and growth rates. It worships efficiency instead of grace. Into this world step three figures who offer sharply different answers to the same fear. Milton Friedman emerges as the prophet of rational freedom. Leave people alone, he argues, and their choices will correct the system. Hyman Minsky, shaped by crisis and debt, sees something darker. Stability itself, he warns, breeds excess, speculation, and collapse. And Murray Rothbard, uncompromising and solitary, demands purity, a market entirely free from the state, because any interference is already corruption. Each offers more than a theory. Each offers a moral stance. Friedman trusts choice. Minsky distrusts calm. Rothbard worships liberty without compromise. Together they trace the fault line of modern civilization, between order and chaos, confidence and fear, faith in markets and fear of what markets do to us. The century's struggle no longer plays out on battlefields. It unfolds in arguments about what keeps civilization from consuming itself. Milton Friedman steps onto the stage as Hayek's heir, but with an American rhythm. Less metaphysics, more arithmetic. Less Vienna cafe, more Chicago lecture hall. In the 1950s and 60s, when Keynesianism rules like a benevolent monarch, Friedman appears as a polite heretic, asking an uncomfortable question. If governments can fine-tune demand and cure unemployment, why does inflation keep coming back like a fever? His answer is sharp and unapologetic. The problem, he insists, is money itself. Inflation is not a moral failure or a flaw of capitalism. It is a monetary phenomenon. Print too much, prices rise. Tighten too hard, recession follows. The cause is not greed or fear, but mismanagement of the currency. The remedy, for Friedman, is not planning or discretion, but rules. A steady, predictable growth of the money supply. No improvisation, no political temptation. Remove money from the hands of short-term politics, and the economy will stabilize itself. This turns economic policy into a moral vision. Freedom, Friedman argues, is not chaos. It is order without command. Clear rules, voluntarily followed, allow free individuals to coordinate better than any bureaucracy. His trust in rationality is immense, perhaps too much so. Markets left alone are treated as mirrors of reason itself. By the 1980s, his ideas ignite a new era. Deregulation, privatization, global trade. Liberty is called back as the cure once again. Yet every faith has its irony. The freer markets become, the more visible the weaknesses of the very humans expected to behave rationally within them. Hyman Minsky is a Keynesian who has lost his innocence. Where Keynes still believes uncertainty can be managed, Minsky sees it as fate. To him, capitalism is not a system drifting toward balance, but a living organism swinging between fear and euphoria. The moments economists celebrate as stability are, in his view, the most dangerous of all. The safer the world feels, the braver its gamblers become. Minsky looks closely at the psychology of finance. Calm periods invite risk. When profits look reliable, debt starts to feel harmless. Firms borrow not to survive, but to speculate. Households follow. Confidence feeds on itself, and soon what looked like prudence turns into mania. The collapse does not arrive through fraud or conspiracy, but through belief, the shared conviction that this time is different. For Minsky, credit is both the bloodstream and the poison of capitalism. Without it, growth suffocates. With too much of it, collapse becomes inevitable. Every boom quietly builds the structure of its own destruction. Crisis is not an accident. It is the system correcting itself violently, restoring caution only long enough to prepare the next excess. He becomes the dark romantic of post-war economics, warning that prosperity itself is the most dangerous narcotic. For decades, his voice stays on the margins. Growth looks strong, markets look calm. Then comes 2008. Banks fail, credit freezes, confidence vanishes overnight, and suddenly Minsky's words appear everywhere, etched almost like an epitaph across the financial system. Stability is destabilizing, he had warned. The century listens at last, but only after the damage is done. Murray Rothbard takes the Austrian tradition and strips it of every last compromise. Where Hayek fears central planning and Friedman merely distrusts it, Rothbard declares open war on the state itself. To him, taxation is legalized theft. Regulation is tyranny in polite language. Politics is not governance, but parasitism. The state, he insists, does not protect order. It feeds on those who create it. Rothbard imagines a world built entirely on voluntary relations. Markets replace ministries, contracts replace laws, moral norms replace coercion. Money returns to gold or private issue. Competition governs everything, from schools to roads to policing. What he offers is not just an economic theory, but an ethical rebellion. Human beings, he believes, are capable of self-rule if only they are left alone. For Rothbard, freedom is not a tool, it is sacred. Any act of coercion violates moral law. Any voluntary exchange affirms it. Where others see markets as instruments, he sees them as expressions of human dignity. Spontaneous order becomes almost theological, freedom elevated to a first principle beyond negotiation. Critics call him naive, even dangerous, a thinker who mistakes moral purity for realism. But his clarity proves magnetic. Rothbard gives shape to libertarianism and to the radical vision of anarcho-capitalism, a civilization without rulers held together by conscience and contract alone. In his world, every intervention is a sin, every free choice is a virtue, and society, finally unchained, must live with the full weight of its freedom. By the middle of the century, the West has lost its gods, and with them, its certainties. The great promises of equality and freedom have both curdled into nightmares. What remains is a quieter hunger, the need to believe that civilization still follows some intelligible order. Friedman, Minsky, and Rothbard each try, in his own way, to rebuild that order from the wreckage. Friedman places his faith in reason. Humanity may not be perfect, but it can be disciplined. Clear rules, stable money, personal freedom. This becomes his substitute for moral law, a secular belief that order can emerge from rational self-interest. Control less, trust rules more. Minsky refuses comfort. He looks directly into instability and calls it normal. To him, crisis is not failure but rhythm. Capitalism breathes through booms and collapses. Uncertainty is not a flaw to be fixed, but the pulse of life itself. Stability, he warns, is an illusion that prepares disaster. Rothbard turns away from both restraint and realism. He seeks redemption through purity, absolute liberty, no coercion, no compromise. Every rule must be chosen, every bond voluntary. Freedom becomes what revelation once was, the final source of meaning. Together, they offer three secular salvations: rational discipline, tragic realism, faith in freedom. Behind them lies the same unease. How do you hold a civilization together when it no longer believes in providence or equilibrium? By the late 20th century, economics is no longer searching for wealth. It is searching for coherence, a way to live with fear, freedom, and responsibility in the absence of certainty. Beneath their arguments about money and markets lies a deeper dispute. Not about policy, but about human nature itself. Economics, after a century of equations, is forced back to an older question. Who are we that we build such systems and then collapse beneath them? Milton Friedman offers an optimistic portrait. His human being is rational, broadly trustworthy. Imperfect, yes, but capable of learning and adapting. People pursue their own interest with enough discipline to sustain order. His citizen does not need command. Choice is enough. It is a moral optimism wearing the clothes of economics. Hyman Minsky paints a darker figure. His human being dreams and forgets. He mistakes calm for safety and builds towers of credit on fragile confidence. Only crisis restores memory. To Minsky, progress is cyclical repentance, humanity repeating its errors until fear reminds it of its limits. Stability is never permanent, uncertainty is. Murray Rothbard's human being stands alone, sovereign, inviolable. He owes nothing to society except honesty in contract. Any imposed authority, even a benevolent one, is an insult to dignity. Freedom is not a means, but an absolute, an ethic of isolation elevated to virtue. Together, they form the century's moral triptych. Friedman's disciplined chooser, Minsky's anxious dreamer, Rothbard's uncompromising individualist. And so the 20th century ends where it did not expect to, not in science, but in anthropology, with the recognition that no economic system can rise above the human soul that sustains it. In the end, man, not money, proves to be the greatest uncertainty of all. The 20th century ends without resolution, but not without belief. What survives are three faiths, each born from the wreckage of certainty. Friedman, Minsky, and Rothbard share a common fear, that humanity's most brilliant invention, the market, has slipped beyond its maker's grasp. Each searches for a way to anchor civilization before it drifts into abstraction and chaos. Friedman places his trust in rules. He believes reason, once shaped into clear and predictable policy, can protect freedom from emotion. His faith is scientific, almost stoic. Discipline over impulse, stability through restraint, liberty safeguarded not by virtue, but by consistency. Minsky's faith is darker, cyclical rather than linear. He sees capitalism as a creature of habit and delirium, swinging endlessly between euphoria and collapse. There is no final cure, only vigilance. His is not a religion of perfection, but of resilience, survival instead of harmony. Rothbard retreats to the last place he trusts, the individual conscience. Where systems fail, he believes moral autonomy can still preserve dignity. No collective wisdom, no benevolent authority, only voluntary action and personal responsibility standing alone against coercion. Together, they write the century's closing testament. Economics is no longer a hunt for universal laws. It becomes a meditation on human fragility. In their disagreement lies a strange unity. All three accept that the fate of the system mirrors the nature of its creators. The world they leave behind is ingenious, anxious, and dangerously free. A civilization held together not by certainty, but by the fragile belief that freedom itself might be enough. Here is the thought that closes this scene. Every age invents an economy, and then discovers it has invented itself. Friedman trusted reason to discipline freedom. Minsky trusted fear to remind us of limits. Rothbard trusted conscience to stand alone against power. None of them solved the problem, but together they revealed it. Markets do not fail or succeed on their own. They amplify who we already are: hopeful, anxious, disciplined, reckless, free. And here is the provocation. If our systems keep collapsing and recovering in our own image, what does that say about the kind of people we are becoming? Join me in the next scene, where the story turns inward once again, where economics meets psychology, expectations and illusion, and we ask whether the greatest instability in modern markets is not money or policy, but the human mind itself.